There comes a time in every new photographer's life when someone says to them, "You have a fancy camera, you should photograph my wedding." That's pretty cool, but is it really such a good idea? Let's talk about it. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. Someone in my community or in a Facebook group will say they just got a Canon this or a Nikon that or a Sony whatever, and someone asked them to photograph a wedding. They're understandably very excited and undoubtedly had the best of intentions. But like so many other things, you don't know what you don't know. I'm all for the democratization of art and think that anyone who wants to create should. Fewer barriers is good. Back in the day, if you wanted to create portraits or photograph a wedding, you needed specialized equipment and worked to become adept with it. Becoming a professional photographer was an investment, not only financially, but also in one's time to learn how to use those tools. There persists in the popular consciousness the idea that if you have a camera of a certain caliber, you should photograph a wedding, or an engagement session, or otherwise start a business. There was a time when access to the tools of a professional photographer was outside the financial means of most people. These days, and this has been the case for at least a couple of decades, those barriers are gone, and literally everyone has access to professional, or at least semi-professional equipment. Flashing very forward to 2024, it's hard to go wrong with nearly any camera you buy. There are pros and cons to every brand, but on the whole, they're all at least pretty good. There are, of course, different levels to this depending on which product line you're looking at and how much you want to invest. But if you want hardware that can produce what people think of as professional results, it's within the means of far more people than it used to be. On the whole, I view this as a positive thing. However, photographing a wedding or photographing people on a professional level involves more than just your gear. Compared to ye olden film days of professional photography, with digital capture you can change any number of options on the camera or lens or flash and see the results instantly. When mass market digital capture became a thing in the 90s, I thought even then that if one were to embrace this new technology, you would become a better photographer. You didn't have to send film out and wait for it to be processed to see the results. You could click the shutter release and see the results instantly. Then you can change a setting and see those results and compare the differences. I thought this was an incredibly valuable learning tool. Then again, I'm also one of those people that reads the manual, so take that for what it's worth. There are no do-overs at weddings, so you have to get it right the first time. You have to know yourself and know what you're capable of before telling someone you're going to be responsible for the images that tell the story of their wedding day. I have a story to illustrate my point. A few years back, I had a rare summer Saturday off when I received a call from a friend who managed one of the local wedding venues. She asked me calmly, but with a bit of franticness in her voice, if I was already booked that day. It turns out the wedding that was supposed to start in 90 minutes, the photographer was a no-show. While still on the phone with her, I started pulling my wedding clothes out of the closet and moving my equipment closer to the front door. This is also a reason to make sure your batteries are always charged. 1 hour later, I was at the venue and meeting the couple. It was kind of exhilarating because I didn't know anything about the flow of the day nor who any of the players were, but I introduced myself first to the groom, who was super thankful I was there, and then to the bride and the bridal suite, who was likewise happy to see me, not to mention all of their parents. Back in my photojournalism days, the nature of the job was to show up at an event and document what was happening. With spot news, there wasn't a script or an itinerary. You went with the flow and used your experience and instincts to tell the best story you could. Sometimes with weddings, as in this example specifically, the same approach was called for. I ran with what information I had, and it ended up being fantastic. The photographer that was a no-show may have convinced a couple that they were a professional, but they in no way acted professionally. If someone gives you money, or even if they don't, and they expect you to be at a location at a time you've agreed upon, you have to follow through. I wish I could say this was an isolated story, but sadly it's one I hear kind of regularly. Without fail, at the bridal shows I attend, some passerby will share the sentiment that they should have hired a professional instead of having a friend with a camera or their uncle do their wedding photography. I'm endlessly amazed at how many stories there are of people who have convinced others they're a professional who either don't show up or don't have backup gear, don't have insurance, don't use a contract, don't know how their own gear works, or know how to deal with something on the day that just went sideways. We all have our first wedding. We all know what it's like to be in a situation that you couldn't have anticipated, or have your gear suddenly stop working, or deal with a drunk groomsman that's holding up the works. Dealing with these unforeseen complications can only come from one thing: experience. If you don't have much practical experience to speak of, it's going to be harder to work through things on the fly. But once you do, you'll then know how to deal with it, and you could apply this experience to the next time something outside your control goes wrong. My advice to photographers newer to the profession and those who want to be a part of it would be this: know yourself. Know that you can get yourself out of a situation that isn't going to negatively affect the couple whom you've agreed to photograph. Photography is not a fake it till you make it profession. This stuff is important. You might not have the same perspective as me or feel the way about weddings that I do, and you don't have to. But being a professional and acting professionally are skills born of learned experience and good instincts. So go photograph that first wedding, learn from it. Better yet, before taking on that responsibility yourself, go work with established photographers and see how they react in those situations. Become active in local photography groups and seek out people with more experience. You'll be surprised at what questions people will answer if you just ask. Make them simple questions, though, I say as I wag my finger, because while a lot of us will share advice, we do sometimes have our own work and deadlines to attend to. Attend webinars and go to conferences and take some workshops. Or hang out on YouTube where seemingly all the answers are. Meet other people in your situation and compare notes. People who do the same thing as you can often be your collaborator instead of your competition. In regard to weddings, don't lose sight of what we're supposed to be there for. It's for the couple who hired us to give them a tangible representation of this day in their lives. Take it seriously and be responsible with this privilege you've been given. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. That really does help with the YouTube algorithm. What are your thoughts about being a professional and acting professionally? Feel free to talk about it in the comments. If you'd like to see more videos like this one with more stories, check out this other one I made for you. This is Ask a Wedding Photographer. I'm Seth Kaye, and I'm here to help.